Welcome to the Caribbean, everybody. Land of reggae, rum, and who would have thought armies? That's right, folks. Turns out these island nations aren't just about chilling on beaches and sipping cocktails with little umbrellas in them. They've got defense forces, and some of them are more formidable than you might think. Now, you might be picturing a bunch of dudes in Hawaiian shirts holding rusty muskets. But hold your horses. We're talking about professional military forces here, with real training, real equipment, and real challenges to overcome. So buckle up, because we're about to embark on a journey looking at three armies of the Caribbean, from the big dogs to the little pups. We'll be looking at everything from their historical legacies and manpower to their equipment and budgets. By the end of this series, you'll be able to impress your friends with your newfound knowledge of Caribbean military might. Or at least, you'll be able to win a bar bet. Either way, let's dive in. First up, we're heading to the largest island in the Caribbean, Cuba. Now, Cuba has a bit of a reputation, right? Cigars, classic cars, Fidel Castro rocking that military fatigues look for like ever, historian. But beneath the surface of salsa rhythms and vintage Che Guevara t-shirts lies a military history as rich and complex as a perfectly aged Cuban rum. We're talking centuries of struggle against colonialism, a revolution that shook the world, and yeah, that whole Cold War standoff with the United States. See, Cuba's army isn't just about parades and symbolism. It's a product of its history, forged in the fires of revolution and tempered by decades of international pressure. So, before we judge their firepower, let's take a trip back in time and understand how Cuba's army became the force it is today. Trust me, it's a story you won't want to miss. Now, you can't talk about the Cuban army without talking about the revolution. I mean, these guys literally overthrew a dictator in the jungle, using guerrilla tactics and sheer willpower. Talk about a hostile takeover. They were like the scrappy startup that took on the corporate giant and somehow, against all odds, won. And just like any successful startup, they had to adapt and evolve to survive. Historian: after the revolution, the Cuban army went from ragtag rebels to a full-fledged military force, facing down threats both internal and external. They had to learn to defend their newfound independence, all while navigating the choppy waters of the Cold War. And let me tell you, those waters were choppy. The US was not exactly thrilled about a communist country setting up shop right on their doorstep. So, Cuba had to get creative, finding ways to punch above their weight and deter any potential invaders. But it's not just about brute force. The Cuban military also emphasizes education, with many soldiers receiving technical training and even pursuing university degrees. They're not just soldiers, they're engineers, doctors, and even teachers. This focus on education has helped create a more versatile and adaptable force, capable of responding to a wide range of challenges. It's like having a Swiss Army knife of an army, ready for anything. Sure, it might not be the most cutting-edge tech out there, but hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? Plus, they've become masters at adapting and upgrading their existing equipment, squeezing every last drop of usefulness out of it. It's like that friend who can fix anything with a roll of duct tape and a prayer. They might not have the newest gadgets, but they know how to make what they have work. Despite their resourcefulness, the Cuban military faces some real challenges. The US embargo has made it difficult to acquire new equipment and spare parts, forcing them to rely on ingenuity and a bit of DIY spirit. And then there's the issue of funding. Let's just say the Cuban economy isn't exactly booming, which puts a strain on military spending. It's tough to maintain a modern army when you're running on a shoestring budget, defense strategist. But despite these challenges, the Cuban military remains a force to be reckoned with in the Caribbean. They're battle-tested, well-trained, and fiercely dedicated to defending their island nation. So, while they might not be topping any global military rankings anytime soon, Alright, let's switch gears and head south to the land of reggae, jerk chicken, and surprisingly capable defense forces. That's right, we're talking about Jamaica. Now, when you think of Jamaica, you might picture laid-back vibes, beautiful beaches, and Usain Bolt outrunning everyone and everything. And while that's all true, there's another side to this island nation. A side with a rich military history dating back centuries. From battling pirates to playing a role in global conflicts, Jamaica's military journey is as vibrant and diverse as its culture. So, before we get into the modern-day Jamaican Defense Force, let's take a trip down memory lane and explore the historical roots of this Caribbean military power. Trust me, it's a wild ride. Now, Jamaica's military history isn't all sunshine and reggae beats. Like many Caribbean nations, they had to fight for their independence, first from the Spanish and then from the British. And let me tell you, colonial powers don't give up their prized possessions easily. Over the centuries, Jamaican soldiers fought bravely in various conflicts, from the Maroon Wars against British rule to World War II, where they stood shoulder to shoulder with Allied forces. Talk about a diverse resume. These experiences shaped the Jamaican military, instilling in them a sense of discipline, professionalism, and a deep-seated commitment to defending their homeland. They learned from the best, and sometimes unfortunately the worst, of global military powers. And as Jamaica gained its independence in 1962, they carried these lessons forward, forming the Jamaican Defense Force, a modern military force ready to face the challenges of a new era. Now, let's be real, the Jamaican Defense Force isn't the biggest kid on the block. In fact, compared to some of its neighbors, it's downright tiny. But as they say, it's not about the size of the dog in the fight, it's about the size of the fight in the dog. And trust me, the JDF has a whole lot. They might not have a massive arsenal of tanks and fighter jets, but what they lack in quantity, they make up for in quality and, dare I say, the JDF focuses on training its soldiers to be adaptable, resourceful, and ready to tackle a wide range of challenges, from natural disasters to peacekeeping missions. They're like the Swiss Army knife of Caribbean defense forces, always ready to lend a helping hand or a well-aimed shot depending on the situation. Here's the thing about the JDF. They're not just about fighting wars. In fact, they play a vital role in Jamaican society, providing disaster relief, supporting law enforcement, and even helping with community development projects. Think of them as Jamaica's very own superhero squad, always ready to swoop in and save the day, whether it's rescuing people from a hurricane or rebuilding a school after an earthquake. They're not just soldiers, they're engineers, medics, and even teachers, using their skills to make a real difference in the lives of everyday Jamaicans. They're like the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, but with better music and... Now, like any military force, the JDF faces its fair share of challenges. Limited resources, the ever-present threat of natural disasters, and the need to combat transnational crime are just a few of the hurdles they have to overcome. But despite these challenges, the JDF remains a beacon of professionalism, dedication, and resilience, always ready to defend their island nation and lend a helping hand to their neighbors. They might not be the biggest or the most heavily armed, but the JDF proves that size isn't everything. With their unwavering spirit, commitment to service, and of course that undeniable Jamaican charm, they'll continue to be a force for good in the Caribbean and beyond. Welcome back to the Caribbean Military Rundown. So far, we've tangoed with Cuba's battle-hardened veterans and Jamaica's disciplined defenders. Now, let's set our sights on Hispaniola, home to the Dominican Republic, and you guessed it, more fascinating military stories. The Dominican Republic Army, or Ejército Nacional Dominicano if you're feeling fancy, boasts a respectable force for an island nation. We're talking over 30,000 active personnel, ready to defend beaches, democracy, and maybe even the last slice of pastelón. But hold your horses, folks. Before we crown them the heavyweight champs of the Caribbean, we gotta analyze their arsenal. Do they have tanks? Do they have fighter jets? And most importantly, do they have enough boats to keep up with those speedboat driving drug lords everyone's always whispering? Don't worry, we'll get into all that juicy stuff soon. For now, just picture this. Thousands of soldiers in crisp uniforms, marching under the Caribbean sun. It's a sight to behold, even if they're a little sweaty. Let's be honest, who wouldn't break a sweat marching? Now, you can't talk about the Dominican military without acknowledging their history. I mean, this is an island that's seen it all. Colonization, dictatorships, you name it. And through it all, the military has been there, shaping the nation's story in ways both heroic and, let's just say, complicated. We're talking about a military force born out of revolution, guys. They fought for independence, they fought against invaders, they even fought amongst themselves a time or two. Hey, nobody's perfect, right? The point is, these guys have some serious experience under their belts. But here's the thing about the past. It has a funny way of shaping the present. The Dominican Republic's military history has instilled in them a deep sense of patriotism, a fierce determination to protect their homeland, but it's also left them with a legacy of political involvement, something that always makes things a little bit, shall we say, spicy. So as we dive deeper into the Dominican Republic's military capability, it's a reminder that behind every uniform, behind every weapon, there's a story waiting to be told. And trust me, in the Dominican Republic, those stories are always interesting. All right, let's talk money, people. Specifically, how much dough the Dominican Republic spends on its military. Because let's be real, you can have all the patriotic spirit in the world, but without cold, hard cash, you're not going to have much. Now, compared to the big spenders like the US, the Dominican military budget might seem a little, well, modest. We're talking a little over $1 billion a year. That's like, what, one Beyoncé concert tour? Maybe, but hey, before you start picturing Dominican soldiers holding bake sales to buy new boots, remember, context is key. $1 billion might not sound like much in the grand scheme of things, but in the Caribbean, it's actually a pretty decent chunk of change. Section 4, Tech Talk, exploring the Dominican arsenal. S2, plus, they're resourceful. They've got their priorities straight, focusing on things like border security and disaster relief, which, let's be honest, are pretty important when you live on an island prone to hurricanes. Well, don't expect any stealth bombers or nuclear submarines, but they're not exactly rocking slingshots and coconuts either. Their most modern equipment includes some decent tanks, armored vehicles, you know, the kind of stuff that makes you think twice about starting a land invasion. And they've got a small but capable air force, with helicopters for surveillance and transport, and even a few fighter jets for, well, let's call them persuasion purposes. Narrator. Okay, let's get down to the nitty-gritty, the toys. What kind of firepower are we talking about? Now, I know some of you military buffs out there might be scoffing, saying, Trevor, those jets are older than your jokes. And you know what? They're still jets. Besides, in the Dominican Republic, they have a saying, Más vale viejo conocido que nuevo por conocer. It means, better a known devil than an unknown one. In other words, they'd rather stick with what they know works than gamble on some fancy new tech that might break down in the middle of a hurricane. Smart, right? So we've covered their history, their budget, their weapons, but what about their actual role today? Well, unlike some countries we could mention, the Dominican Republic isn't exactly itching to get into a war. Their main focus is on keeping things peaceful at home and lending a helping hand to their neighbors. We're talking about disaster relief, fighting drug trafficking, and generally being the responsible guys on the Caribbean bloc. They've even sent troops to help out in UN peacekeeping missions around the world, which is pretty impressive for an army that, let's be honest, doesn't get nearly enough credit for its professionalism and dedication. So the next time you see a Dominican soldier, don't just see a guy in a uniform. See a protector, a peacekeeper, and a damn fine representative of their country. Oh, and maybe offer to buy them a beer. They've earned it. Well, there you have it, folks. Our whirlwind tour of Caribbean military might is coming to an end. We've explored the revolutionary spirit of the Cuban forces, the quiet strength of the Jamaican army, and the historic resilience of the Dominican troops. From high-tech equipment to shoestring budgets, we've seen it all. And you know what I've learned? Don't underestimate the island nations, my friends. They may be small, but they are fierce, proud, and ready to defend their home turf with everything they've got. So next time you're sipping a piña colada on a sunny Caribbean beach, take a moment to appreciate the men and women who keep those beaches safe and those cocktails flowing. They may not always make headlines, but they are the unsung guardians of paradise. And that's pretty cool if you ask me. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and most importantly, stay thirsty for knowledge, my friends. If you enjoyed this exploration of Caribbean armies, don't forget to like and subscribe for more military analysis content. Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below.